If I believe there's a reason for this pain I'm going through, if I believe that leaving me was all that you could do, if I believe that I can feel you by my side, I'll make it through the night. If I believe that time will teach me how to find my way, if I believe that broken hearts grow stronger every day, if I believe that now you're dancing across the sky, I just might get by. If I believe that memories won't always hurt this much, if I believe that I will see your face again, I can wait till then. If I believe I'll hold you in my arms again, I can wait. I know that I can wait. I can wait till then. I can wait till then.
Good evening. Welcome to the Somerville Overcoming Addiction Show. My name is Joanne, and we have a special guest here tonight, and her name is Courtney O'Keefe.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you.
And as you can see, she's the former Ward 5 Alderman.
Yes.
My Alderman.
Yes.
And my neighbor for many, many years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome neighborhood, Magoon Square.
Well, I decided that the next segment of the show was to interview people that are from Somerville that had either been addicted or had family members that had struggled with this disease. Mm-hmm. And as we all know that, as you see, was it Anonymous People, that 80% of the country is affected by it.
Wow.
So the whole thing is not to be ashamed of what's happened in your life, but to talk about it and discuss it.
Absolutely.
So what would you like to talk about tonight?
You know, I first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Addiction has really impacted my life as two of my favorite roles that I get to play, as a daughter and as a sister. And I'm in a very interesting position in life because although I did lose somebody, I lost my mother to addiction, I get to celebrate every single day having my brother still here, still with us, working his program, working to keep himself healthy and sober. And I'm actually very excited to report that this past January 12th, which is a very significant date, it's actually 2 days after my mother died from drugs, Connor celebrated his 3rd year anniversary of sobriety. And it's just, every day is 24 hours, but when you get to those milestones of even just that 1 year, even just 1 year is 365 days sober.
Absolutely.
And when I look at people who are I've been sober for a year, been sober for a year and a half, I bet you didn't even imagine yourself sober for 5 minutes. And here you are. Here you are sober for that long. So
One day at a time, but it's great when you can have
oh,
those
absolutely. Absolutely.
week to month to years. And that's wonderful. And I want to congratulate you, Connor, for your success and improving your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's an honor.
It really is. It really is. And Connor decided to get sober when he was about 37, 38 years old. So he does fall into kind of that age category where a lot of people are struggling with addiction, the 20-year-olds, the 30-year-olds. When I have a conversation with people about addiction, or I talk about my experiences with addiction, I talk about my mother being 63 years old when she died from addiction. And I think that that's an aspect of it that a lot of people have a tendency to forget. Addiction is like any other disease, cancer, any sort of a medical condition. It doesn't care how old you are.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't care how much.
It does not discriminate.
It does not discriminate at all. And to look back and know that my mother was 60 years old when she went to rehab for the first time, 62 years old when she went to rehab for the second time, and she was dead by the time she was 63 years old. It happens that quickly. The being fully consumed by it really does happen in a very quick manner. My mother struggled with it for 30 years. She
I didn't know it was that long.
She did, yeah. So my mother's pathway, I think like a lot of people's pathway, my mother had very significant surgeries in the very late 80s and early 90s, and I mean massively invasive medical procedures. I mean, got the last rites 2 or 3 times while she was sick, and she was given narcotics for pain because people are in pain after medical interventions. Let's stop kidding ourselves that people can just walk out of the hospital and feel nothing. She was given narcotics and was never, ever assisted in how to get off of them. It was, the classic metaphor of just being dropped into that vast ocean and kind of good luck, and she navigated it as best as she possibly could, but like so many, just couldn't make that transition away from those drugs.
She's lucky to have lived 30 years.
Very true. Very, very true.
Frankie was 10 years.
10 years, yeah. This is actually something that Joanne and I have in common. We both have lost a significant human in our life. My mother, your son. Very interesting to kind of be sitting here next to somebody who lost their son. I went to a lot of wakes and funerals, and that is the most difficult thing to do, is to walk up to the mom and the dad and say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that the natural cycle of life has been disrupted in your home.
Right, at 32.
Yeah.
No, it was really, really hard for him. It was, because he already, a lot of times people do have an addictive behavior, so that's why they're workaholics, or they eat too much, or...
Shopaholics.
Right.
Yep.
And he had an addictive behavior, but he tried so hard, so many times. I think he went to rehab 11 times. But I knew, in a way, in my heart, I knew that I was going to be burying Frank. It was very, very hard, to live day in and day out and having 2 of your children have problems with drugs.
Absolutely.
It does affect the family totally, So sometimes there was a while there that I was drinking. I've stopped drinking over 6 years ago. Because I said, why were you drinking?
Right.
You go out and socialize with people, and then you go home, and the next day you have a headache, and you say to yourself, well, why did I do that? Well, I was socializing. Well, you know what? I can socialize with water.
Absolutely.
So when I go out there, I just say to them, well, can I buy you a drink? Yes, buy me a water.
Absolutely.
If that's what you want to do.
Absolutely. And how did Frank get addicted? What was
Okay.
his avenue into
All right,
addiction?
so Frank bought a motorcycle.
Understood.
And I told him, no, you don't want that because you're not going to pay attention. Well, he did. And in 1 month, he had an accident in Woburn. And what happened was his whole left side was affected. Both legs, his left leg, both bones were broken. And his wrist, he had problems with his wrist. It was around Patrick's birthday, which is around Memorial Day. And I was on my way up to Winchester Hospital because the accident happened in Woburn. And they said, well, the Winchester Hospital can't handle this, so we're bringing him to Mass General.
Understood.
And then I went there. So that's what started his addiction. And in the hospital, he asked the nurse that was on duty, is this medication you give me addictive? You know, I mean, Frank liked to drink, you know, and as a lot of other young adults, you experiment. If you don't, that's wonderful, but most of the time, everybody experiments with something, whether it's alcohol or whether it's drugs. And he didn't like any of that, even weed. He didn't like pot. And he ended up getting addicted to OxyContin because that's what they put him on.
Right.
You know, and it doesn't take long to get addictive to that.
It does not. 5 days. I was told 5 days when you're given pain-killing narcotics in the hospital. That's all it takes is 5 days to get for the claws to get right into you. Thankfully, Governor Baker has put in some moratoriums in hospitals that prevent patients from being given that kind of high-octane painkiller after 3 days. You know, so it's a really good step forward at the very beginning.
7 days. They're only allowing them to have a 7 day.
7 day? I heard 3.
Is it? Well,
Yeah.
maybe at this point it could be 3.
It could be 3, but I have to give them credit for handling it at the beginning. Handling it at the very beginning when something can really start to come to fruition at you know, right after somebody has had a surgery in a very vulnerable time in their life, psychologically, physically. I know when I get hurt, when I got hit by the car a couple of years ago, you're at your weakest, and you're at your most vulnerable, and you're in pain, and you don't want to be in pain. And you know, after taking EMT training, that pain can also impact other aspects of your body, your blood pressure, your heart rate. So doctors and nurses and paramedics and EMTs aren't able to get those baseline vitals that are so critical. So that way they can tell when you're not safe, when you're kind of going outside the limits of where you should go. Now I think for people like the two of us, we're waiting on the other end. We're waiting for more beds to open up. We're waiting for better opportunities for our community members that struggle with addiction. I can remember having, whether it be my mother or Connor, having them in that really fragile space where they're ready for help. They have finally relinquished power and have said, I'm ready for help, I want to go. And then the phone calls start. Now you're trying to find them a bed. Now you're trying to find them a facility. And that time period of when they're ready to go can change in an instant.
Absolutely.
At any point, they can just say, you know what, no, I'm not ready. I can do this on my own. I'll start going to AA meetings. I'll start going to NA meetings. But if you can get them from that point right into a rehabilitation center, and from there to a halfway house, and keep working that program, then we can have a lot of success. We just need more avenues out of addiction because we have so many into addiction, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you, how Frank found himself in that position. My brother Connor had injuries. He was giving painkiller narcotics for it. My mother had significant surgeries, like I said, was giving, pain-killing narcotics, your son as well. We've read stories about how Alex Foster got addicted and how Ryan Harrington got addicted. And right there, we already have 4 avenues into addiction. We already have 4 ways that people can find themselves in the midst of addiction. And when some of us stand back that have lived through either somebody being addicted and eventually dying, or somebody being addicted and they're working that program every day, we know there needs to be more ways out. There needs to be more ways out of that life, whether it be through physical activity. I know a lot of my brothers and sisters in recovery use physical activity, whether it be rock climbing or martial arts is very big. Yoga is huge. Reiki is huge. We were talking earlier about medicinal cannabis. Medicinal cannabis can also assist people, especially with that pain factor. People who have been injured, who decide that the narcotics are not something that they can do anymore, that they can maybe bring that medicinal cannabis into their life and relieve themselves of that pain, take that edge that usually pushes somebody else over into using again. So when we think about that, we need to think about it in a very total and holistic way.
Absolutely.
It's not just about taking the drugs away from them. It's about reteaching them how to live, how to handle stress, what to do about their pain, what to do about their free time, what to do about that depression and the anxiety that can set in,
Absolutely. Sometimes that's the reason why they're using.
Absolutely.
Is because they don't feel comfortable in their own skin. And I'm going to say that in the past, since 2013, when we started, after Governor Patrick Duvall had deemed that we had an emergency, an epidemic, that's when Somerville had their first public meeting down on the old fire station in East Somerville. And that's where Matt Gannum, myself, Jesse Klingon, Matt Gannum, did I already say his name?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Judy Walker. There's a whole bunch of us, the Fosters.
Yes.
We all started going to meetings and talking about what we wanted to see happen. And then we finally made the name of our group called Somerville Overcoming Addiction. And we wanted to go out and help people. And the one thing that I did notice, well, in 2009, when I lost Frankie, I went to Somerville Cares About Prevention, and I said to them, how come we don't have Narcan?
Right.
And at the time, they said, well, we're working on it, but there's a lot of red tape. So that was 2009, or maybe 2010 is when I finally went out, because Frankie died in November of 2009.
So we're talking about a decade's worth of work.
Right. So imagine it took them, 2013, when we were at that meeting, the fire department had just trained people to give Narcan.
Right.
When the reason why I asked them is because after Frankie had passed, I lived in Revere for a year. I didn't want to live alone in the same house that I lost my son.
Understood.
And they were already doing that in Lynn.
Wow.
And that's why I went to them and said, well, what's the story on this? Oh, well, we're working on it. It took 4 years.
Wow.
So that's a long time.
It really is a long time. It absolutely is a long time. And we just can't have that delay anymore.
Well, we have a problem with even stigma is still alive.
Absolutely.
And still huge.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what stops a lot of progress. And in the addiction world and the network that's trying to supply, different programs for them, it's a learning experience. A lot of people that are working in those networks are already been through addiction themselves, which I think is a good thing, because it's saying, look at me, I did well, I'm alive. You know what I mean? Because people say, well, what do they know? The doctors and the nurses.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
So now they've come to the conclusion now that there's a lot of people that have dual diagnosis, that have mental health issues, and you have to take care of the mental health issues before you can take care of the addiction. So, they go since 2013, they have started to add different programs. Instead of shipping them to California or shipping them down to Florida. Because if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they throw them out.
Right.
So your child's down in Florida, and then there was brokering going on down there, and it's like, we're at this point now where we're almost stable,
Right.
you know, as far as getting help. Even with Column Health, I love their program and everything else, but they had to put a lot of different people in there, you know, because they do whole health.
Wow.
You know, so they do have the meetings, they do have the psychologists, they do have, you know what I mean? It's like the doctors. And it takes a while to get a good group of people together in each program. And so far, I think that a lot of them have done, they're there now.
I'm glad.
And from that,
Yeah.
they're adding the things like you said, yoga, meditation, you know, all the things that help you. Well, after you stop using and now you're more aware of your body and what's going on,
Right.
you have that nervous energy
Yes.
from all that anxiety. You need to get rid of it.
Absolutely.
And I see you do a lot of walking.
I do.
You know, and that's good for you because that's time that you could be thinking about what's going on in your life. What can you do? Because you think a lot.
I do.
I mean, it's great that she comes on the show and she's telling me things and I'm like, oh my God, she's really amazing.
Thank you.
You know, and I know that I went to one of your wellness.
I did. Through Somerville Local First, my previous life, when I was the executive director of Somerville Local First, we had a health and wellness event that we ran up the Armory. And we did approach it in a very, like you said, holistic way. We had people there with their financial health, their online health. We had medicinal cannabis companies there to talk to people about health and wellness. You were there.
We had my green nurses there.
Yep, the green nurses were there to talk to people about medicinal cannabis. We had people from the banking industry to talk about financial health. We had people talking about physical health. Yoga instructors there, skincare people, but it was a really great event and a really great collection of people that their sole focus is to make sure that a human in every aspect of their life is healthy, happy, efficient, and you really can't ask anything more from a group of people. It was a really wonderful and a really amazing event. I did want to go back and elaborate on some stuff that you had mentioned. I do walk a lot. That's about as shocking to some people as, the sky is blue. But I do a lot of walking, and I find that helps me with my grief and my grieving process. For those people that already know, for those of you that don't know, about 1.5 years before I lost my mother, I lost my father. And I lost my father very suddenly to a brain aneurysm. And it was a very sudden impact that not only hit the entire family very hard, but particularly my mother and my brother very hard, which then really kind of escalated and intensified their using. Both of them at the time were struggling heroin addicts and didn't know how to grab their grief while being addicted. Connor would channel his grief into his recovery. My mother struggled, and she struggled massively. And I can tell you about calling 911 to do wellness checks. We attempted to have her involuntarily committed, and we failed. The infamous line from the judge was that my mother was not a danger to herself or to anybody else. My mother was dead about 6 months later. So it just goes to show you kind of how things, when they don't match up, it really can be life or death. And in this situation, it was death. But that grieving process is such an intense process. And I didn't really start going through it until after my mother died. But through walking and cycling, and my friends down at Ninja's kickboxing studio, they see how hard I'm hitting that bag, and there might be some faces of some pharmaceutical company CEOs that I might be knocking
great.
out a little bit, but you go down there and you hit the bag a few times, you go out for that run or for that cycle. That helps me with my grief, a whole hell of a lot. What are you doing to kind of navigate your way through that?
Well, I do a lot of, I go to a lot of we stand out in front of Purdue Pharmaceutical
Nice.
with pictures of our children. And there's a group called Mass Team Sharing, and everybody gravitates to each other to take care of each other's pain. And it's on Facebook, but the thing is that you can't be on that page unless you've lost someone. So we always say it's a group that you don't want to be a part of, but unfortunately it happens. So, you know, we've done a lot of work there by going down to Washington. We walk to Washington. We rally out in front of the art museum down there, the Shacklers, and this is blood money. You know.
Wow.
We go to Maura Healey has a whole bunch of us that go out in front of the courthouse when there's been 2 court dates. The first one was in, I think, the summer 2 years ago, and then in the winter. And we came from all different parts. There were people up from Virginia. There were people from all over that would come in and support each other.
Yeah.
And there's different organizations that we all have huge posters of our children, you know, and they ask us, you know, 3 different questions on our children. You know, Frankie was very creative. He was very congenial. You know, he loved people, and he would like to help them if he could.
Absolutely.
And he couldn't help himself. You know, so we do things like that. You know, we're doing last year in Vegas. I didn't get a chance to go, but it's called Recovery and Mobility, and that's by Ryan Hampton. Ryan Hampton's out of California, but he also worked in Washington.
Wow.
So he is a recovering addict, and he's been doing a lot of mobilizing people and getting them together. One time we just took I took 2 days off from work, and we drove down overnight in a bus. The next day we rallied out in front of what is it now? Where do they have, isn't that terrible? When you get to be 66, this is what happens. So don't get old.
I'm going to be 40 in August, and I haven't decided whether or not I'm really going to be 40. I could be 39 for the rest of my life.
Well, that's what I should have done, because
know,
maybe
right?
I would have a memory right now. But no, we were down out in front of, where do they legalize the prescriptions? Where they...
Pharmacy?
No,
Thinking
no.
of a pharmacy.
Isn't that terrible? Food and Drug Administration?
FDA.
The FDA. All right, see that? It was the letters I
But
didn't
it took
remember.
2 of us to get there.
Yeah, we're going to do charades.
Yeah, we'll make it through. We'll make it through, folks. Stick with us. We'll make it through.
So we went down there, and I don't know if you know of Dominic Esposito.
No.
Okay.
No.
So it's like it's many of us together trying to get the word out about addiction.
Right.
And we need to take care of it. So Dominic made an 800-pound spoon.
Yes. So I've seen that. I've seen that online.
Right, and he was here on the show.
Yep. Bent.
A bent spoon. So he brought it down with
Powerful.
us,
Powerful.
and he dropped it out in front of the FDA. We had little bottles that said, "Guaranteed to kill you."
Wow.
You know, the Shacklers, and put it, and it was a date on it, and Cross and Bones, and people laying down with tombstones on their chest, and others throwing those bottles around, and we wanted people to know how, you know, and that's how you have to do it, with shock,
Yes.
you know, and it was done in an hour, and we all left
Yeah.
and went home. But that's what we do. We travel all the way down to Washington, D.C. They paid for our hotel, our buses, you know, gave us dinner and breakfast, and the next day we were on our way back.
Unbelievable.
Because we need to express what's going on
Absolutely.
and what's happened to all of our children. And just seeing all those pictures, it's totally amazing.
Yeah. Now, is it pictures of people who have lost children or people who have lost a loved one?
Both.
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 It's
Children
a collection
or
of both of them. Unbelievable. And you know, it's funny because I bet some of those people are looking out and going, "Wow, a big bent spoon to signify a heroin user. That is shocking. That is overwhelming." For some of us, that was every day. That was normal. It wasn't uncommon for me to find needles inside the house. bags of needles.
And not find any spoons.
Right.
And you wonder where they
Absolutely.
are.
Absolutely.
And then you see rings around them and the burn mark. And
Yes.
you say to yourself, you know. So the thing is that Dominic's brother was an addict. He's in recovery right now. And his mother used to, you know, call him all the time about his brother. So he's making a big impact. He does tours with that spoon all the way from Maine all the way down past Washington D.C.
Wow.
He's been in Times Square on that big screen.
Jumbotron. Wow.
You know, so he's making an impact. So if all of us go out there and do our part, eventually they can't ignore it.
No.
You know,
Absolutely not.
and the things that a lot of times when I get on and I say things, all I hear is this negativity and calling them losers and addicts and everything else.
Dirty
and you know, they're our family.
That's somebody's child.
That's right.
You know, my mother was somebody's child.
Right.
And my grandmother is 87 years old, and she lives in Saugus. My Auntie Terry and my Uncle Mike, and she is buried 2 children, pretty much from addiction.
Right.
And people like her, my mother was 63 years old. My mother was still somebody's child.
Right.
And this kind of disregard for that is the most infuriating. We can talk about how infuriating it is to have that lack of beds, to have the lack of, you know, medical support, but what really kind of grabs at my heart and soul is this, well, they just need to stay clean. No, they don't need to stay clean. Clean is an awful word to use. They're not dirty. They're addicted. They're struggling. They have a disease. This is not something that's just, oh, well, just stop. No, they can't just stop. So
Their body is in agony. There's so much pain involved.
Absolutely. And when people say that, I try so hard not to get angry and react angry, because all I'm doing is reacting angry to somebody who is clearly not educated on this,
Right.
and somebody who has clearly not lost someone to this awful condition and has not lived with people who suffered from this. And you know, it's hard to kind of train. You know, you can take, you know, the girl out of Somerville, but you can't take the Somerville out of the girl. I'm also Irish, so that like compounds a little bit more anger. It's hard not to be angry, but I really pull myself to be sympathetic with them. I mean, you have to sympathize with somebody who has no clue what it means or no clue what it is that they're even talking about. They have no idea, and you wonder why they're even commenting on it in the first place, and they have no place to comment on it. And I think that's why people like yourself, you know, Somerville Overcoming Addiction, the Ryan Harrington Foundation, the Alex Foster Foundation, you know, anybody else who's really pushing this, you know, this movement of compassion and assistance and education is just so critical, especially now at this day and age where addiction can start as young as elementary school, high school, you know.
It's there.
It absolutely is there. It absolutely is there. And that education piece, I think, is one of the most, if not the most critical, one of the most critical, because you want parents to know what it looks like, what the symptoms are. Even something, you know, that's not as hardcore as heroin or fentanyl, even just alcohol, because that can be something that people use to kind of numb that anxiety and the depression, in the bipolar disorder, and the physical pain, the psychological pain. Maybe they had trauma in their life. It's another huge piece, and I think it's so important that you pointed out how that dual diagnosis, how they have to handle this as a holistic approach where you have people who have an underlying condition, but then have this addiction on top of it, trying to deal with that. And you know, we can start going into the conversations about healthcare and, you know, what all that stuff means. But
Right.
you know, that'll be the next show, the next 2 or 3 shows, I
I'm gonna
think.
have to have her be my co-host.
You know, but I mean, I'm a little girl who lost her mother, you know, and I was the one that found her. I went upstairs and I found her, and
right in the next shot was my finding
absolutely,
my Frankie.
yeah, very close, same neighborhood. And I remember calling 911, and I remember the firefighters coming up the stairs, and I have one particular firefighter from Seven's Heaven, very good friend of mine, and he looked at me and he said, "Has she been drinking again?" And I looked right back at him and I said, "I think she's gone." And he stopped dead in his tracks and looked at me and said, "You're kidding." I said, "No." I said, I think she's gone. 4 or 5 of them walked upstairs. They had to physically move my mother. She was on the side of the bed, and they had to pick her up and physically move her on the bed. They put a blanket over her for her dignity. I'm going to be very real with you, with all of you watching this. My mother had no shirt on, no bra on, and you had 4 or 5 men walking up there. I can't begin to even verbalize the professionalism that these men showed, and the compassion and the kindness that they showed my mother, making sure that she was covered and placed properly. And I just, you know, because this is yet another reminder of the fact that our firefighters do a lot more than just fight fires. Our police officers do a lot more than just arrest people. They're not called ambulance drivers, they're EMTs and they're paramedics and they're first responders, and they do a whole hell of a lot more than just drive an apparatus or just go and put an oxygen mask on somebody. These are the people that go out that are on, I'd like to say right up there with the front lines, people like you and I who go and find our loved ones who have transitioned on to the next life. They're right there with us and deserve all of the credit in the world for doing something like that. And you know, I will forever be grateful to the Somerville Fire Department and the Somerville Police Department and you know, the Patty Catentes of the world. And I'm going to give my buddy Katie McDade a big shout out.
Absolutely.
To Katie offered so many times to help out my mother, and my mother's family who really stepped up, who got her into rehab for the second time. You know, this is rough on everybody.
Absolutely.
You know, and the loss is a ripple effect.
And I'm going to add to that, as far as the Somerville Police Department, well, I know Katie very well, and the other day I was at a meeting at the police station, and there were 4 or 5 officers that were sitting there that have been gone through recovery coaching. And Katie's one of them.
Yes.
So the one thing that I noticed when I first started to get involved and go to the public health meetings, Jack Connolly and also Mary Jo Rossetti asked me to be a part of it. She was very compassionate. I could see tears in her eyes when, you know, we would talk about what happened to my son and everything. We had a meeting one day with the Cambridge Health Alliance. And oddly enough, well, it wasn't odd, but they were all giving themselves a pat on the back. You know, it's like, oh, we do this, we do that, and it was, and at the end, they introduced me. And I said, I'm a mother that's been affected by addiction for over 20 years. I have a sad story and I have a happy story. The sad story is that I've lost my son to addiction, and the happy story is that my other child is doing well in recovery.
Good job, Pat.
But what I do want you to know, and you know, and I had to ask him too, do you mind if I ever mention you? You know, because a lot of times I wouldn't. And it's like, you know, we really haven't talked about this, you know, and I wanted to talk more about Frankie because I want people not to think that Frankie wasn't a person that cared about, you know, others, and you know, he was a decent human being. He loved to make people laugh. He took care of his mom. You know what I mean? He always loved, you know, would make sure I was okay, and other people.
Right.
He used to go across the street and do my niece's hair at 7. Imagine him. You know, their mother had
It's
died
funny,
of
but I'm
breast
not surprised
cancer.
because I remember Frank, and he was just such a fun a fun kid. So I'm really not surprised by it, honestly.
They would go over there and do her long hair and get her ready for school, and get Michael, who was 5, ready for preschool. And, well, my brother had to go to work earlier, so he did a good job with it, you know, and he loved them. And he, to him, they were his, like, nobody could touch them. You know what I mean? He was their guy. Well, he's probably still their guardian angel.
Right.
But Frank was a sweetheart. But I was sitting there and I told him, I said, the one thing that I see, that's, first of all, you need to have recovery coaches in the hospital.
Absolutely.
As well as in the police station.
Absolutely.
As well as in the courthouses. I have gone through to ask for recovery court, because it's best to have a court, not have them in a situation where they're in the same court with people that are having problems with, robbery, These people have addiction issues, so what you need to do is to have people that are willing to help them. And Cambridge has a beautiful recovery court, and I've had that judge on the show. And unfortunately, she just retired.
Right.
And Roanne. And the thing is that I'd like to see more of it.
Right.
And
there's no reason why somebody who's struggling with addiction should be in the same courtroom as somebody who's a criminal, who has committed a crime.
Right.
It sets that precedent in the mind of the addict, of the person that's really struggling.
So I went to a homeless court, which was amazing.
Yeah.
I've been to recovery court, and I sat there and watched how she handled them, and with the utmost respect. When they would come in, they would ask her, she'd say, "And how are you doing today?" And she showed that kind and compassion. And the thing is that that's what they need. They need a hug. They need to be told that they matter. And I always say that, is that we all matter and mattered. So let's think about what we can do to improve it.
Right.
So I said to them, at this point, that's what you need is recovery coaches. I mean, not that I know everything, but I've been on the other side of the bed when they were treated and mistreated because of their addiction, and want to actually climb over and start shaking them and say, "What's wrong with you?"
Right.
They deserve to live just as much as you do. And the thing is that even if the recovery room was loaded with people that had addiction issues, you still have to take care of them. Right. They're human. And I told them, they're not going to see someone come into a primary care physician and say, "I'm an addict." You're going to find them in the emergency room. What you need to do is to have them go and take sensitivity classes to know how to deal with the people that have a problem. So those were my suggestions. And to tell you the truth, CHA has done an awful lot and improved in their program. And I say that to when I see Mary Casesso.
Yeah.
And I forget Kathy's name, but the two of them always come to the MORE meetings, which every month, the third Thursday of the month, you can go over to the Somerville Lions Club, which is on 9 New Washington Street, and they have a meeting. And a lot of people that come there from all different things, the Gavin House, we all go in there and we try to, I have actually been a part of conversation on how do we introduce the Good Samaritan law.
Yes.
We had many phone calls on that. The people have to be aware that it's okay for you to go and get help for someone, and you will not be held responsible for you being around where there's drugs.
Absolutely.
Unless you do have, I think that there has been problems where if you had a really criminal record, that sometimes that can be affect your effective for you. And secondly, always have Narcan on hand. Now you know that the insurance companies will give you Narcan. You said that, did you pay $2 for it?
I've actually purchased Narcan before. It's under, I think I bought 2 of them and it was under $5 when I purchased them. Yeah.
And there are Narcan trainings being done throughout the city.
Yes.
And at that point, it's free.
Please learn. Yeah. Please go. Please learn. Learn with the hopes that you never have to do it. I say the same thing when people are learning CPR. Learn it so you never have to use it.
And there's all different kinds of Narcan. You can get the cheaper form where you have to put it all together, or you can get the double dose that all you have to do is squeeze it in the nostrils.
Right.
You don't have to do any mixing.
Right.
You know,
And the nasal dosage is about 4 milligrams. So, and usually that's what the package comes in. So at any point in time you could have 4 to 8 milligrams, and that it's to assist until the ambulance comes and takes them to the hospital. It's fast acting, but it's short lived.
Right.
But when somebody is in that case, administer it. Get it in there.
You said you are educated as an EMT?
I did take EMT training. I didn't get my actual license, but I did do the training. Of course, we learned Narcan. I've known CPR, probably for over 20 years. My
You're
father.
getting old.
I know, which is so weird because I'm only 24. No, I'm kidding. My father had heart issues, and I remember a conversation between all of us, and I think he looked at me and said, do you know CPR? I was also a coach at Manton High School, so you're mandated to know CPR. You're also mandated to know, concussion, how to approach a concussion as well. But CPR is one of those things that you're mandated to know, and you are protected under the Good Samaritan law if you administer CPR in the best way possible that you know how. For anybody at home that learned CPR maybe years ago, I remember first learning it, and it was 10 compressions and 5 breaths. It is now 30 compressions and 2 breaths. But if you don't know the patient, do not give breaths. What you really want to focus on are those compressions, and keeping that heart moving. I was telling Joanne a story. I was in a restaurant, and I had a gentleman sitting to my right that I thought was reaching into his pants, and he leaned over and he laid his head on the table, and he overdosed. I mean, he was sitting dead at the bar. Everything had stopped working, and he was a big boy, so I had to put my arms under his arms, and I had a couple of gentlemen. One of them was a Middlesex sheriff, and we laid him on the floor, and it was just compressions, like compression, compression, compression. I don't know the patient. I cannot give them mouth to mouth. I don't know how they administered the drug. If they inhaled it, it could still be in their mouth, and I could overdose. It's critical that you remember that. And compressions, compressions, compressions. He got up and walked out. He lived. He got up and he walked out. And I remember, I speak every single day with my brother Connor. He's my best friend, and I remember telling him that story, and he said, if he ever goes out again, I hope there's some other little girl sitting there waiting just in case if anything bad happens to him. And like I said to you earlier, he could have walked into his car. He could have been found the next day, and we wouldn't know. There's at least one life. There's at least
just one.
Just one that was saved, and there's definitely plenty others that that have been saved. But isn't it such a great success story to talk about the ones who have survived, the ones who are living today because they brought themselves through that tough time. I'm friends with a lot of people on Facebook, and I'm really happy, genuinely happy that people get to write their stories of recovery. Admittedly, I wish we could have had these conversations years ago.
Absolutely.
I wish the stigma didn't exist years ago, where we, two people like us could sit on this, channel and talk about addiction and talk about our loss and talk about our grief. And even in the home setting, talk about anxiety, talk about depression, talk about difficult times going on in high school. Talk about the fact that maybe your son or your daughter is struggling with their gender, struggling with their sexual orientation. That is a very direct lead into numbing that pain and numbing that fear that somebody's going to find out that they're gay. Somebody's going to find out that they're they're a man inside of a woman's body, that they want to transition, they want to live their authentic life. And if they don't have that support system around them, they have that other avenue. You know, my mother and I we always got along, but I would have to say that there was definitely a disconnect, especially after I came out as a gay woman. I came out on August 18th, 1998 at 9:45 p.m.
Wow, she remembers the time.
I do. It's a very significant time for me. It was the day after I turned 18. And I think that there was a little bit of fear for my mother, and this is part of the grieving process. This is part of kind of trying to understand the person now that they're gone. And you know, there was admittedly a little bit of anger towards my mother regarding how I was treated as a gay woman. But I have to take a step back. You have to take a step outside of the situation and look at it and kind of say a couple of things. Number one, she was probably afraid that I was gay. We see so many people get assaulted, murdered, hurt, everything, because they're gay. That simple, stupid reason. It really is kind of like stupid, right?
It is.
It is. On the flip side, too, she was also addicted. And that also adjusted her thought process. And I have to remember that. I have to remember that there were two different people. There was Lee, I have her name tattooed on my arm, and there was an addict. And I'm still in this journey of learning who Lee was. And Lee was amazing. She was beautiful. You can see the beautiful photographs behind us of her. She was incredibly smart. She was incredibly hardworking. After my dad got hurt at work, my mother went out. My mother was the main breadwinner for a long time. So my parents had like this real partnership, but for me, now that, you know, she's been gone for 2 years now, I'm still learning about her. And my recommendation to anybody who has lost somebody to addiction, don't ever stop learning about them, you know? Look at those photographs. Look at the footage of them playing sports. You know, I have some photographs of my mother when she was younger, and I remember comparing them to my niece Shannon, and they could be twins. I mean, they could be the same person, only one of the pictures is in black and white, and the other one is in color.
Oh, one of mine was in color, and I had blonde hair.
Yeah.
But then I had another picture. That goes to show you. You know, they were just doing color then.
Right.
At 66.
Right.
I was like 2. And the same picture, I had dark hair. It's
Yeah.
like they were painting the colors
Right.
on. But it's come a long way.
It really has.
So there's only a few things. We actually only have like 4 or 5 minutes left, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I know.
And you did all the
was a great
talking. I thought it was great.
This was a great conversation. I really, really appreciate it. And I also wanted to, there was a photograph that was kind of spinning around of my mother and I sitting at a table together. And Mary Jo Rossetti actually took the one of the pictures. But one of the previous pictures that you saw behind me notes March 6th as Black Balloon Day. And this is a day where we really think about and acknowledge those who have lost their battle with addiction. And so if any of you at home would like to, on March 6th, just hang a black balloon outside of your door. You can also put one up on as your social media photograph. I know a lot of people like to do that. I will be putting up that exact photograph on my social media on March 6th. Feel free to take it from me. I had a couple of people that snagged it from me last year when I put it up. But take that time to acknowledge our loved ones and our community members who have gone way too soon.
Absolutely. So I just want to mention a few things. First of all, I was a part of a meeting that talked about the safe injection site.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of people worried that, you know, there's going to be addicts there. You know what I mean? And they're going to be coming all over the place and destroy their city. Come on now. This is just a way to save someone and make them safe in case there's fentanyl or carfentanil. We don't want to lose them.
Right.
It's harm reduction. And the thing is that while they go to these facilities, they also learn that they can get help there too.
Right.
And when they're ready, the people that are assisting them to be safe do help them. And they're very, very successful. I was at the State House when the person from Canada were one of the first
Yes.
clinics that were there, and they were talking, and of course Joe Curtone was there, and we were listening to the success rate and how that there hasn't been any deaths there,
Right.
and
That's some
they have them in
serious data.
Australia.
That's serious
Yeah.
data.
And they have them in Australia. They have them in a lot of other countries, and Portugal. So they have been known to be very effective.
Yes.
So, if we do get one, don't be alarmed at it, because they said that there is no crime, or there has not been any crime, because they already have the data and the statistics around their facility.
Absolutely. It's time, and we've been mentioning it throughout this entire show, it's time to really sit down and have some very serious conversations about increasing the avenues out of addiction. Sometimes for some people, the old avenues just aren't working. They know how to manipulate those avenues. Those avenues sometimes aren't even available. If you don't have a bed and you can't go to a rehabilitation facility, I mean, that's a huge piece that you can't bring into your life. So I'm looking forward, and I've had conversations with the mayor about this. I'm really looking forward to these conversations. I'm looking forward to changing this system. This system, to say that it's not working is the understatement of the year. It has failed. It has failed you. It has failed the Harringtons. It has failed the Fosters. It has failed the Westcotts. It has failed all of those families that have put a loved one in the ground from this stuff. It has failed us. And it's time that we step up as activists, as grieving humans, and start refocusing this effort and start changing the narrative on it. I want more success stories. I want more Connor O'Keefe stories. I want more Pat Ravigio stories. Those are the stories that I want to hear. And we can't get there by, treading water and saying, no, we're definitely not going to do that because I don't like the idea of it. If data shows that it works, we need to talk about it.
Absolutely. And addiction is not 9 to 5.
No, it is not.
It's 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
So now I'm going to say thank you for coming.
You're so
And I'll
welcome.
give you a hug and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
And I know that you're going to do it.
I am.
And I'm very proud of you. I
is-
try.
Yeah,
But
this is actually the very first time I've ever publicly spoken about my mother and publicly spoken about Connor, and I have to say that it's been a huge relief. I talked to him today, and Connor is just so vocal and so prominent in the New Hampshire area, and I also wanted to give his sponsee Jackson a huge congratulations on his 1 year of sobriety. 365 days. Congratulations, Jackson. Awesome kid, so super
guess
happy
what?
with
We're
them.
no longer on the air. But we're still on YouTube.
Yes,
So if
we are still on YouTube.
Yes.
So I actually wanted to give a huge shout out to the gentleman right out here,
Stuart.
from Stuart from the Somerville Media Center, who did all the beautiful photograph work behind me. This is me in my Lyrics Champs hat. And then there have
That
been
big smile.
I know, right? This has been an incredibly cool experience, and I really appreciate being
You're
on
more than
here.
welcome to come on anytime.
I would absolutely love
And
to
to tell
come
you
on
the
again.
truth,
Yeah.
I'll give you a few of your own shows.
Sweet. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I can do that. I'm the producer.
She wields a lot of power around here. I like that.
Thank you.
Having
Thank
a
you
woman
for
in charge.
coming.
Yeah, thank you. This
Absolutely.
is awesome. Yeah.
Well, we can get it done. I'm sorry.
High five.
Bye. All right, I'm going to go have him shut this off.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone. I could have brought it in and shut off myself, but hello, darling. Do you want to
Try not to lift up my shirt in front of the camera.
No, we don't want that. don't need a ride?
No, I'm good.
You gonna walk?
I am actually going to be meeting a friend.
Okay, that's good. You know, tomorrow there's gonna be a meeting over here at the cantina.
Yeah.
Mexico.
The Hour Revolution?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I think Rand invited me to that.
Yeah, he invited me to.
Thank you so much for your time.
You know, I'm a delegate for the Democratic Party. So I go